and those medical products have been invented by people. I mean, it has been invented by engineers in a lot of cases. So many medical products get invented by doctors, right? Because they see a challenge, they see a need, and they want to do things better. And they just India is filing many patents. I think if I remember the number correctly, 29,000 patents were filed last year. I may be getting my number wrong, but it's a significant number, and that's only been increasing year on year. To doctors who had turned VCs, who were entrepreneurs, who were also engineers plus doctors, right? So I was fortunate enough to have been exposed to people like that for me to believe that it's possible. People also have this kind of a career path. Had I only been exposed to people in India at that time, I don't think I would have known that there's even a possibility of a doctor to become a VC.
Hey everyone, this is Utkarsh and welcome to Tribex, where we chat and deep dive with exceptional folks who have paved their own ways in the community of space. Today I have with me Dr. Mansi Agarwal. She is a partner at Alchemy Growth Capital, a renowned growth stage VC fund who invests in healthcare and consumer companies in India. She has been a founder herself and with patents in healthcare and biotechnology. And just look at her interdisciplinary journey from being a dental surgeon to now being a venture capital. And now she has, written this comic book on startup ecosystem with a partner at Alchemy. So I'm quite excited for this conversation. And without further ado, I welcome Mansi to Tribex. So welcome Mansi to Tribex.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Utkarsh, for having me here. And hello to all the Tribex folks who will sort of tune in to listen to this podcast. I hope it's all worth your time.
Awesome. So to start off, I would like you, Mansi, to tell me a bit about your early days and childhood and what you used to dream about of being, what kind of person you be turning out and what you wanted to pursue back
Sure. So Utkarsh, like most of India, I was born in a middle class household, and I actually come from a large family of lawyers. So in a way, my destiny was to become a lawyer. I hadn't changed this path. My father was a lawyer. I have more than 20 lawyers in my immediate family, so that was something that I think was sort of always discussed, that if nothing else, you do become end up becoming a lawyer. So I think while I was growing up, I was also exposed to doctors in my family, and I decided that I will not become a lawyer and become a doctor. And hence I think it was imperative for me to change paths. Otherwise everyone sort of ends up in a certain way in my family. And at that point I decided to become a dentist. I think I was trying to choose the shorter path of becoming a doctor. I thought I'll do a 4-year program and I'll be a doctor instead of a 5-year MBBS and then MD and so many other things. Little did I know that I would end up studying much more than what I had anticipated at that time. So I got into dental school, and then my journey, and I think my exposure to medical products started, and that's how my journey towards venture capital, which is slightly more convoluted than most other VCs, but I would not change it for the world.
So you were a studious child, if I am right, or you were more into like sports. I'm just trying to capture, for somebody like you who who wanted to become a dentist, eventually became one, and then had patents, and then completely changing your trajectory, doing law in between as well, I guess,
Right.
and then pursuing something into biodesign from Ames and Stanford, and then again changing your path from investment banking to finally to venture capital.
Right.
Right? So that's quite unordinary because a lot of my doctor friends, right? They're very straight line, right? Become one, then that's it.
Right.
That's it. They don't think about any other thing else, right? It's very uncommon, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
how would you like to describe that, and how did you ended up, taking such a long journey, of academics, and then being into VC as well?
Utkarsh, it sounds very convoluted, but while I was doing all these things, it actually felt like a very natural progression, and I'll tell you why. So I was, I mean, studious, yes, but I was also quite entrepreneurial even in my younger days. In fact, my sister and I think we were 7 or 8, we used to run a small library because as children, all you have as assets is books. So we just decided that we were going to monetize that, and we opened like a neighborhood library and made some little pocket money with it. So I think entrepreneurship can happen in various ways. You don't necessarily need to become a founder of a company. You can do like small little things, which are also entrepreneurial in nature. But coming back to just my own career journey, which sounds very there's so many things that happened, but I'll tell you, it was one thing after the other, which just felt it just felt like a natural progression from one thing to the other. So while I was in dental school, most doctors, they don't realize it, but as doctors, you're constantly engaging with medical products, right? And those medical products have been invented by people. I mean, it has been invented by engineers. In a lot of cases, so many medical products get invented by doctors, right? Because they see a challenge, they see a need, and they want to do things better, and they just come up with a product to solve the problems that they are facing, right? So while I was doing that, I was as a dentist facing challenges with tuberculosis. I think a lot of people don't know, but dentists, being because of the proximity of being with the patient so close and with the open mouth in India, having the incidence of tuberculosis that it does, face or at least are more prone to get TB. So I actually, in my dental school, started working on a better way of diagnosing tuberculosis. That was how I started, which was a very out of the blue idea, because it typically, at least at that time, this I'm talking of 2007, it took about 2 weeks to get TB diagnosis. And I was like, by the time someone gets to know they have TB, it's already progressed to a stage which where they're being contagious to so many people. So it just sort of started with an idea like that, that okay, I'm sure there's a better way, faster way to do TB diagnosis, and let me get let us start working with it. And my cousin happened to be an engineer, and she was a biomedical engineer. And I called her up and I said, you know what, there's this is a medical problem, and I really want a engineering view to it as well. Can you help me? And she was gracious enough to do that. And we both got together and just started sort of tinkering with ideas and on what you can do. And as students, you have limited resources, and we came up with something, and you know just had the audacity to directly go to the National Institute of Tuberculosis with our idea. I mean, most people would shy away. Most people would think that,
Correct.
what we're doing is not good enough, and maybe it wasn't. But sometimes you just have to take that first step. I mean, we found a way to get to the director himself and just went and presented it. And I think he was very kind and very taken aback that these two young girls have come up with a solution. Good, bad was not the point. I think for him to see that there are young people in the country who want to do something different, he really welcomed us with open arms, and he really gave us access to his labs, etc. And I think that was a point which sparked my interest in doing something in the innovation for medical products. So that's how I started. It started with something as random as that. And then I thought that, considering Indian government, because it was a national organization, right, a government organization, if they are open to an idea like that, I'm sure a lot of private people would be. And let me do this in a much more formal way. So as soon as I graduated, I joined the Stanford Biodesign program, which taught young doctors, engineers on how to make medical devices from India for the world. So that's how it started, and then the journey unfolded. So it started, I keep telling this to so many people, don't be afraid of a no. You know, just have the courage to just take the first step. It may not yield results, but that first step itself is so important. And if you can do that and not get bothered by a no that you might hear, you can just do wonders.
Correct. So I remember from your example, I also remember my story. I was doing engineering, but I was doing electronics engineering, and I found out that there is not much scope of electronic engineering from where I was coming, or where I was, representing back then in 2016, right? So I thought, what are my other passions, right, which I can truly relate with. So I thought, writing is something which I relate much, right, which I also discovered in college, by the way. And then I started, what can I do with writing? Maybe I can, write a show, or maybe I can create a show. The people can come together, they can discuss their issues. And what I'll do is I'll bring that sort of a class in terms of presentation, how people are presenting themselves, how they are speaking, how what kind of emotions does it produce inside people. So I thought to take this idea to the government of Chhattisgarh.
Okay.
And yes, to your surprise, people appreciated it a lot,
Yeah.
that I'm trying to do something. But initial enthusiasm really dies very fast,
That's
because
true.
those people also don't respond later. And sometimes, all the efforts you take turns out into nothing. So you have to, see other things also, and have to see a bigger vision, how you can turn it around. And I think you have seen that. Before going into that, I wanted to ask you, you have spent good amount of time in Indian research ecosystem, right? So being a researcher yourself, having 6 patents in your name, and also, seeing research being evolved in healthcare space primarily. So, what do you think about Indian research ecosystem as such? What are good things about it, and what are 3 or 4 bad things or loopholes where we can, improve really much better?
See, I think India just has a natural talent of a lot of STEM graduates, right? So, I mean, India is now getting to a point where a lot of research is coming out of academic institutions. India is filing many patents. I think, if I remember the number correctly, 29,000 patents were filed last year. I may be getting my number wrong, but it's a significant number, and that's only been increasing year on year. So I think there is a lot of things that are happening on the research side. Where I think we could do much better is the translation of research, right? And there are multiple factors which lead to success of research, in my view. One is, I think the people who are doing the research should firstly believe that whatever they are working on needs to get commercialized, right? In their mind, they just need to believe that this is something that should come to the markets. They should have that commercial bent of mind. And I think at research institutes, one should get taught what does it mean to take your research from what we call is, at least in healthcare, what we call is benchtop to bedside, right? You do have to take it to the patient, otherwise really any research makes no sense. So translational research, and I think the thought that research should be translational is something that I think just needs to be taught, and it's not a bad thing. I think what happens in academic institutions, and I've been part of a few, uh, is that a lot of professors just I think frown upon the fact that you're trying to make money off your research. There is nothing wrong in that. In fact, success only begets more success. If you see someone in your research lab take something to the market, it will only inspire 10 other people to do the same, right? People need success stories to get inspired by, to believe that it's possible. So I think the ecosystem overall has to talk about commercialization much more. Secondly, obviously, there's the funding gap. There's only limited funding available to to fund research. And I know at least in healthcare and in biotech, BIRAC, which is a government body, they do a phenomenal job of supporting thousands of. I think last year they did. um thousand investments across grants for early stage to mid stage companies, where they are supporting research at the academic level as well. So I think that's one. I think funding impetus is very very critical, and I think it's starting to come. A lot of IITs have their own incubation labs, which take research that is being done within their colleges to to either a commercial partner or to a VC. IIT Kanpur, IIT Delhi, a lot of IITs are quite active in that. But I think there's much more that can be done. It can be go beyond the IITs, because there's so much amazing work that's happening even beyond that.
Correct. Matlab, even I have been part of Shiv Nadar ecosystem, which is part
Right.
of Excel Group, right? So there also, as I interact with professors there, right? So but there is humongous investment on the research part of the Shiv Nadar ecosystem, but I see a lot of gaps being there, right? Because a lot of times, professors are in their own space,
Yes.
even students or scholars are there on their own space. They don't know what the industry requires or what kind of innovation are other people doing, right? I also got to know about that a bit when I met a delegation from Germany, because these guys work very different,
Yeah.
and the kind of innovation that they do is very slow, but it's very effective as well at the same time. So on contrast of that, it's very hard, and it's very time taking even as of now as we speak. For even for the best of the best institutes who are private also in nature,
Yes.
for the translation of the research, right?
Yes.
And it's been a huge problem because in Startup Mahakumbh also there was a good amount of discussion where all the VCs and some of us were sitting together ideating upon this issue was pointed out कि how we can since now there is a enhanced focus or special focus on deep tech, which is a largely campus driven or academic driven piece. This has been a very big issue as of now. So what do you think, since you have spent some time outside also studying biodesign at Stanford? So how do you think? What's the process there, right? What's the process if somebody comes up with an idea? How do they check? Is it idea valid or is it sane also, or nobody has done it maybe, or would it make sense or not, or how do they go about it, and how do people come out that in our nation, India? Right? So what's the difference? What's the contrast there, and what are two three things that we can do about
See, I think there are a couple of major differences. One, from an ecosystem point of view, the universities abroad, they like a lot of your teachers, for example, in universities outside, come from industry, right? You would have someone who is probably have been an entrepreneur. They are coming and teaching your class, so the kind of interactions you can have with them, with people beyond academia, that opens your perspectives much more, right? If you're if you're, let's say, exposed to a doctor turned VC, which is quite common in the US, not so much in India, it just opens perspectives on what is possible and why such a thing is even needed, right? Why such a skill is even relevant in an industry, right? So I think that exposure is very important. I mean, if you're only dealing with professors who uh, have not been part of any business, I don't think they can also guide you better, right? I mean, you also need to take guidance from people who have been in the industry, because an idea is not enough, right? An idea also needs to be executed. It needs to, I mean, you need to get that commercial validation early on, that the problem that you're working on is even a valid problem, right? It's even a
it?
need that is pertinent to be solved. And that can come from interactions only with the commercial guys. And I think that exposure is lacking in Indian educational institutes. Some of them do a great job, like you were saying about Shiv Nadar, I was telling you about IIT Delhi, etc. They do a great job, but I think India is much more beyond these, top universities, and there I don't think there's enough exposure, which is why I believe that, even if the institute is not able to provide you with exposure like that, I think there's enough and more ways for young students to reach out to people in the industry. I mean, you'll be surprised. LinkedIn is such a powerful tool. You and I connected on LinkedIn, and here we are having a conversation. So I think it just takes that courage to reach out to someone that you don't know. Maybe it takes like 100, 200, 300 reach outs to get that five people to even have a conversation. But I mean, then you have to do that extra legwork to be able to get yourself heard, and I think there's nothing wrong in that. I think if you're willing to work hard, I feel that anything is possible.
Correct. So, so yes, from back to your journey from doing biodesign at Stanford, right, to eventually deciding that you should be part of the venture capital industry. So, how did it happen, and is there someone who advised you? Did you had a mentor who sort of told you, "Ki, maybe you can do this better as well"? So, how did that happen?
So, Utkarsh, I think for me, what was helpful was that I was exposed in my Stanford biodesign journey to doctors who had turned VCs, who were entrepreneurs, who were also engineers plus doctors, right? So I was fortunate enough to have been exposed to people like that for me to believe that it's possible. People also have this kind of a career path. Had I only been exposed to people in India at that time, I don't think I would have known that there's even a possibility of a doctor to become a VC, right? Or become an entrepreneur, because that's not a common path, right? So I think I would just give I would attribute my journey to my exposure, which I got through serendipity, that such a path in career is even possible. But having said that, I think mentorship for me was lacking. I wish, and I now contribute a lot towards mentorship. I mentor a lot of people because I wish I had more of that while I was deciding what to do next. Like I said, a lot of things happen naturally, but it was a tough journey, and making that switch is always hard because people it's a very unconventional background that I have. So it always took me much more effort to get what I had to what I was at least hoping to get. So it always took me a lot more rejections than probably an average person. But if you like I always say, if you're persistent, I think anything is possible. So I'll just tell you a little bit about my journey. So Stanford Biodesign is a very interesting program. It's a collaboration between Stanford University, Ames, and IIT Delhi, which brings people from medical backgrounds, engineering backgrounds, together to invent new medical products, right? And as part of the program, there are like 4 to 8 people as part of any batch, and you tend to work or start identifying the problems one needs to work on, filtering them down to 1 or 2 issues that you may want to solve, and that eventually becomes a startup, right? That's how the program is structured. So with the program, I was fortunate enough to start a small startup in the medical devices space. There was a lot of support I received from the government of India, which was funding the Stanford Biodesign program. And with that support, I was able to start a startup. We had a little bit of grants that we received, and take the product to a point where we started talking to a lot of commercial partners. But again, the journey was not easy. This is, I'm talking of 2009, where startup was not a buzzword. I mean, today everyone in India knows what a startup is, thanks to Shark Tank, and just the proliferation of startups all over. 14, 15 years back, this was not the norm, right? Even my parents didn't know what a startup meant. So to have a startup at that time was in itself, I mean, everyone just thought I was unemployed, hence a startup, but that was not the case. So having that, and the number of VCs in India was also, I mean, there were less than 20 VCs in India, right? There's a statistic, and probably I can share that with you post the call. I think in 2013 or 14 in India, there were 50 VCs, 50. Today, there are more than 1,000 VCs in India, 1,000 active VCs in India. So the number of VCs has increased. I'm talking of 2009, where the number was less than maybe 15, 20 VCs. And as a young startup, you go and meet them, but a lot of VCs, and that I can say with confidence even today, don't understand medical technology, right? They don't get it. Like, they'll understand the basic businesses, they'll understand a D2C brand, they'll understand all of that, and D2C and all was not even um, a concept back in the day. So when you would go to a VC, they would just not understand what you were saying. And medical or healthcare companies were not even getting funded at that time. What was getting funded was hospitals, etc., which is, I mean, technically a real estate investment. I mean, it's healthcare, but it's really real estate as far as all parameters of evaluation are concerned. So I, in my interactions, didn't find a single person who was medically, who had a medical background, right? And I had seen, and I, like I said, I was exposed to a very different set of people with the Stanford journey. So I knew that globally there are specialists who look at healthcare, right? And only then they're able to make an investment because they understand the science. To make an investment, you also need to understand the startup's product. If you don't understand that, you also cannot invest in it. So we got a lot of rejections from VCs because we felt that they didn't understand what we were even talking about. Like, their questions would be very basic. So at that time in my journey, I pretty much decided that I'm going to become a VC, because I had been on the other side of the table, and it was a very frustrating experience. And it came from that experience that India does need more specialized VCs. Healthcare, I couldn't find anyone with a medical background who was in venture capital, unfortunately. And I thought that, for me, the right path would be to become a VC. So it was really driven by the lack of interactions with someone who is knowledgeable about the space.
Mm. Correct. I understand, how you were able to take that step, and I think you are very right. Still, it's very hard to understand healthcare space, right? Because even now, a lot of equipments that we see are from Germany or outside. So,
Yes.
uh, absolutely right. It's very hard to innovate in spaces like healthcare, especially, and that's why I think there's a special focus on deep tech. Now, how did Alchemy came into being? How did you met Alka, and how did you guys bonded together? What did you see in each other, and what led to start of Alchemy?
Right. So yeah, I mean, just picking up the threads. As I decided to become a VC, the first part to, for me at least, was to get finance knowledge, which I did through an MBA at Cambridge. Cambridge for very strategic choices because they have a large focus on healthcare. Healthcare and life sciences, so that's what I wanted to get more exposed to in the university ecosystem. So I did my MBA. I moved to Germany to work with a VC fund in the healthcare space, and then I came back to India, and I was working with another private equity fund that was doing some early stage investments in healthcare space called Sabre Partners. So I did that for a couple of years. And then I was moving back to Delhi, and Alka and I got introduced through a common acquaintance. And I think, very much like me, Alka, who has spent, who has a stellar career. She has spent 17 years with McKinsey in their New York offices, leading a lot of their private equity and the healthcare practice. She was coming back to India with a lot of global experience to start a healthcare focused fund. Even today in India, there are less than 10 healthcare focused funds at various stages, and I think Alchemy is one of them. And I got introduced to Alka through a common acquaintance, and we met, we got along very well. And I think I was really inspired by the vision that she had of having a specialist fund, right? I think it's like I said, India has very few specialist fund, especially in early stages. Late stage private equity still has healthcare focused funds, because healthcare has also done very well. I mean, if you see the um, hospital IPOs, etc., healthcare has done very well for late stage investors, right? But early stage, there's still a gap. And early stage, there's a gap because of the understanding of the business of healthcare, right? From science to business. And healthcare has some very unique challenges, like regulatory is very different. There's payer, provider. I mean, I'm sure in every industry there are nuances, but healthcare, you can then add the clinical and the science part of it. It just becomes slightly more complicated as a industry to understand for someone who doesn't come from this space. So I think I was quite inspired by that, and then I joined Alchemy. And now we're on our second fund. Over the last two funds, we are now managing close to $100 million, and I think it's a very proud moment for us to say that now we're one of the most prolific investors in this space, and we really want to support early stage companies who would not get support from other investors. So yeah, so that's about how we came along.
So I was looking into your website, and for every team member of yours, you have these interesting questions that they have answered
Yes.
just beside their photos, right? So I would just want to that this reflects a lot about the work culture at your place. So what is it like? How do everybody collaborate? How is it like to work in a VC fund which is deep tech focused, right? So what it is all about? How do you manage all the operations, or how does the operations look like?
Right. See, VC funds are typically quite small as teams, right? Typically a VC fund will have 4 to 8 people as their team. So it's a very small team, and the culture gets driven pretty much from the top, right? Because unlike a large organization which will have its own culture and it really is dependent on the manager that you may be working with, VC fund, because the just the small team size, just the culture gets driven from the top. I think Alka and me, and I know you touched upon the fact that we've also written a comic book. We are quite, I would, if I can say so myself, we are very fun people. We don't take things too seriously, despite working in a very, very serious industry where we're managing third party capital. So we are responsible for giving financial returns to our global investors. And we also have a fiduciary responsibility towards patients, right? Because our companies are closely working with patients, so we also need to ensure there's enough corporate governance, there's enough clinical governance for them to be able to provide the right care to the patients' lives that they're touching. So I think the responsibility is quite immense, and we take it very seriously. Having said that, despite the serious nature of our work, we also ensure that we're having fun, because otherwise this can become a little mundane. From the outside, the VC industry seems very, very glamorous, but if you're in it day in and day out, it's not as glamorous, because you're doing actually a lot of research. Because you're meeting so many you're meeting so many different companies, and as deep as you may be in any industry, startups job is to do something innovative. And when they come to you with something innovative, no matter what, you can do a lot of pattern recognition, but you still need to sometimes go back, do a lot of research, especially if it's a new technology being developed or it's a new science that's coming out. There's a lot of research associated with that, which can get a little, which is very exciting on one end, but it can get a little mundane on the other. So we try and keep it light, we try and keep it fun. And we have a very cohesive team that has been with us for a long time now. And that's just how it is.
Any workplace, culture thing that you do? which makes sure your team sticks together and you work together, very passionately.
Yeah. So, we actually have a very learning and development oriented culture in our firm. So I mean, I don't know if other firms do that as much. I haven't experienced it personally, but we do, training and development sessions, which are much more around soft skills, right? Because we're in a people's business at the end of the day. On one end, we're raising capital from investors. The other end, we're also deploying capital to startups, right? And we're meeting so many different startups on a daily basis. So we also want, I mean, we also ensure that there's a lot of interpersonal training that happens for the younger people in the team, in addition to the technical training that we do a lot of interesting things. In fact, one of the missions that we have at Alchemy is to give back to is to give back to the ecosystem as much as we can. So something that we do, one is roundtables. Most funds don't have the time bandwidth, but we take that responsibility very seriously. Every month or every 4 to 6 weeks, we put together a industry specific roundtable. So for example, in healthcare itself, we've done a roundtable for an insurance industry, medtech industry, pharma, diagnostics, wherein we bring different stakeholders together for a very deep dialogue. We keep it very small, curated, 6 to 8 people, where people can talk about their challenges with each other, and it really becomes a very interesting brainstorming session for the industry folks. Because I mean, if you're a CEO of an organization, and it's typically done for CXOs of organizations in that sub industry, it can get quite lonely, right? They're not able to talk about their challenges to anyone. So that provides a forum for CXOs to talk to each other and develop deeper connections. So this is something we take very seriously. We do it very, very consistently on a monthly basis. The other thing that we very recently did was, like I was telling you, Byrack is an organization, funds a lot of startups. But what we saw was, they're funding a lot of technical startups. But sometimes the technical founders don't necessarily know how to pitch to VCs, right? They talk to VCs in such a technical language. I mean, sometimes to us it's okay, but to another VC who doesn't have a lot of technical expertise, you know they might just lose the pitch, because they just go, I mean, very deep into technical, whereas they have to get a VC excited about the market opportunity, commercial opportunity, returns, etc., etc. There are many things. So we actually took the onus on ourselves. We trained, we actually ran a mentorship program where where we got over 100 applications of Pyrac funded companies, and we picked a few of them to mentor them one on one on what a pitch should look like. And in fact, three of them post our training session raise capital, because it's about that sharp messaging, not just to investors. In fact, some of them also told us that they use the same messaging to their customers also, right? Even to the customers, you have to relay a commercial value proposition, and not just, I have a great product. You may have a great product, but if it doesn't help with their revenue or reducing their cost or increasing their revenue, you might just not end up converting the customer. So these are some of the things that we do very proactively. We don't need to do that as part of our as part of our VC job. I mean, our work is just investing in companies, but this is something that we want to do as an organization.
Awesome. Good to know. I think two, three practices that I would remember is doing roundtables. And while I was at Inc., which brought tech to India, I remember this is something that we used to do for a lot of corporates like Intel or Infosys or curating these roundtables around topics to not only just to, because I think this is very important nowadays, and podcast also these days provide platforms like those where I coming from a different background and you are already BC, right? So it's opportunity for me also to learn from you, while also I can share a bit about my own experiences, my own humble things, right? So I think nowadays work has become or very collaborative, because everything is so automated. Once you take good decisions, you can actually move forward. So yes, I think good and on that part, and about pitching and storytelling. I think this is where what we felt while I was at Inc or TED, right? Storytelling is something which we lack the most, which Indians were have been the greatest storytellers in the world, but I don't know, somehow we lost that skill. We thought, because I guess we lacked in speaking English or adopting to newer ways of presenting yourself, and suddenly we lost in that battle, and a lot of founders struggle in telling stories, right? So on that part, I think I would love you to give a pitch uh, yourself as a VC fund, maybe. Maybe there are some LPs who are watching this,
Right.
who want to invest in you, maybe. So how would you pitch to an? I'm I was very very excited to ask this question because there are a lot of instances in your book where a VC is also pitching to an LP, and you've brought some sarcasm also on that front. I would love, if there is some, some dialogues that you normally use, some funny instances while you pitch to LPs, apart from founders always pitching to you.
So, funny instances, not so many, because I think a pitch is a serious business. So, in a pitch, you want to be serious and professional. Not serious necessarily, but certainly professional. But I think in any pitch, whether it's a startup pitching to us or us pitching to any investor, you really have to start with what the market gap is, right, and the market opportunity. Even in VC, when we are talking to potential investors, I think the pitch is very clear, and which is the truth also. I think number one, if I just take a step back and I'll come to your question, Utkarsh, you have to be authentic, right? Because as an entrepreneur, if you're pitching to a VC, or as a VC if you're pitching to an LP, everyone is used to hearing so many pitches on a daily basis. They can see through the noise, right? So I think if you start with authenticity, that is very very critical. That's number one. Because if you oversell, everyone gets to know, right? I think any seasoned investor, whether that investor is a LP or is a VC, gets to know. So it's always better to be authentic, and it's always better to manage expectations, right? Because if a founder comes to us and says my company will be 100x, it may be, but the chances of it are quite slim, right? If you just look at how many companies actually deliver a 100x return. So I think it's always good to manage expectations of what is possible, what is not possible. But coming to what you said about our pitch, I think we are very clear that healthcare is a very large segment. It certainly requires expertise globally. There are sector focused funds, and sector focused funds will tend to outperform, right? Because if you are deep in a sector, at some point your alpha will start to develop, right? You will start to see better deals. You will be deeper, your diligence will be better. The strategic opportunities for a company will get better. You can add much more value to your portfolio by being able to make a lot of introductions to maybe customers, other stakeholders, whoever they need to get in touch with. So I think that's largely the pitch, that there is a big gap in India for healthcare and sector focused funds in general, and we certainly fill that gap. And healthcare is a very large market. I mean, India is spends 4% of our GDP on healthcare, and it's only going to increase, and it increases. It's already increasing, right? US is at 17%, we're at 4, but we're two extremes, but somewhere in the middle is where it might be at. So that's really our pitch. Obviously, not in such a dry manner the way I said, but that largely is the messaging that we have.
And matlab, in your portfolio, which are your favorite two companies which you're really proud of? Uh, and how did you found those companies?
See, I think it's like asking any mother who your favorite child is. I don't think I can answer that question, because every company is a favorite. There's a story around every company, how we found them, what we did. Some are doing amazing, some not so much. But I think every entrepreneur, whether they are financially performing as well or not, I think they're equally passionate in what they're building. And I think that's something we're very proud of our founders, that they're all very passionate people who've taken on a very hard task of becoming an entrepreneur. And I think that's something we respect a lot. I mean, all companies, we're very proud of supporting, companies like, because we do healthcare and consumer wellness. So we've invested in companies like Redcliffe Life Tech, which is actually one of the fastest growing diagnostic companies in India. We've supported a very interesting company called Docare, a pharma, an ad tech platform for pharma companies globally. Uh, Very interesting, very niche company. I think if we weren't in healthcare, we probably wouldn't even understand what they're doing, because it's quite deep tech. To extreme of, we've very recently invested in Medulance, which is an ambulance services company, really disrupting the way ambulances are run with technology, with the kind of SLAs that they have, really upping the game on what is expected of an ambulance service provider. In addition to that, we also invest a lot in consumer wellness. Not a lot, but some part of our portfolio is consumer wellness, much more preventive, where we've supported companies like Farmley, which is a healthy snacking company. India is, I mean, you can't take snacking out of our daily lives, so might as well make it healthy. So that's one of the fastest growing companies in that space. We supported Safe, which we're very proud of. It's a feminine hygiene company, and they're doing some phenomenal work, have amazing products, which are, used nationally and internationally by their consumers, who absolutely love them. To recently Slurp Farm, which is in healthy snacking for kids, under their brand Slurp Farm, and they have a millet brand called Millet. So it's a very diverse set of entrepreneurs, very diverse set of companies, and I think we're proud of supporting each of them.
And any interesting story of discovering a company, or maybe usually how do you discover these companies? Do your team brings out these companies to you, or they reach out to you, or is it referred by someone, or do you research and find those companies?
So it's actually a mix of everything. We do our own thesis building on what are the trends that are interesting, and we'll reach out proactively to the startups in that space. We obviously have a lot of companies reaching out to us for funding. A lot of bankers reach out. A lot of operators, like I said, we do a lot of these roundtables, and not just that, just being very core healthcare facilitator. We have a very strong operator network who also tends to refer a lot of deals to us. So we get it from multiple places. One of the interesting stories, and every company, the way you find it, there's a story, right? But very recently, like I said, we invested in Medulance. And the way we actually found them was, they were pitching in the National Startup Awards, right? And as entrepreneurs, you're entering a lot of awards, etc. And I was part of the jury of the awards, and they were pitching not for a fundraise, but just telling their story to win the National Startup Award in their healthcare services space. And I found what they were doing very, very interesting. So I reached out to them post their pitch, because I really liked what they were doing, and they're a bootstrap, profitable, growing company. And when I reached out, they're like, you know what, we're not even fundraising. We just entered these awards because these are very prestigious awards. And I was like, no, no, let's just meet and let's see how we can work together. And it took me over a year to, in a way, convince them to take our money. But that's the job of a VC also. I think most people think that, being a VC, you're just sitting in some ivory tower, and you're only having people come to you for funding. But that's not the case. In many, many instances, you're the one who's actually chasing the founder down, and you know convincing them to take your money, because it's also a very competitive industry, right? Like I was telling you, there are over 1,000 funds in India. So sector focused, less so. But money, and at the end of the day, is also money, right? So if someone's offering money to a founder, and if it's a good space, good founder, good traction, deals can get quite competitive. So you really have to find your edge as to why a founder should pick you over others. And we've been very fortunate to have been, the top pick for our investors. But in a lot of cases, it takes a lot of time to convince someone to take our money, and we have to really work hard on the value add that we can do for them.
Awesome. So now I think we have covered, a lot of these topics about your your journey and the alchemy, bit of it, what your portfolio companies and how does VC like you works. I also want to ask you, about a bit about healthcare ecosystem in India, and what do you think are the problems which is yet to be solved, which you are eyeing upon. Maybe they can be very big opportunities. So, what are those things that you think might be really important, right, in coming time?
See, I think in healthcare, there's an opportunity everywhere, honestly, because I think healthcare is one, and maybe everything, but healthcare is one of those areas where you can only make it better, right? Whether you walk into a hospital and you see a long waiting time, that's a problem to be solved. Diagnostics turnaround is a problem to be solved. Insurance claim management is a problem to be solved. Ambulance, like I said, a lot of these things already exist, right? It's not that these services didn't exist earlier, but people in healthcare, I'll tell you one thing. What is happening is that there's a big paradigm shift in healthcare. you know earlier times, a patient used to worship a doctor, right? And today for some doctors that might still be the case. But what is truly happening is that patients are demanding customer service. They are demanding turnaround times. They are demanding to be treated respectfully. They are demanding transparency, right? So there's a lot of consumerization that's coming into healthcare. When you go to a hospital, patients demand good food, patients demand clean linen, patients demand all of that. Earlier, they if they just got a hospital bed and they get to see the doctor twice a day, I mean, that was good enough. Now patients have a lot of expectations, right? So I think healthcare is also moving towards that. So I think companies that can give a good customer experience in any sector, right? They will have a better chance of winning, because care in itself to a certain extent is fairly commoditized, right? Whether you go to a one hospital or the other, the chances are the clinical levels might still be similar. Yes, like a Medanta might be a different level, some other hospital might be a different level, but more or less, if you're taking hospitals of a certain price bracket, if let's just take that as an example, they'll be fairly similar. So in that case, where they get more attention from the doctor, probably the doctor spends 5 minutes extra to listen to them, is more empathetic. Those things have started to matter to patients a lot more, which was not the case earlier, right? So that's obviously the consumerization. That customer service is an important layer that's coming into healthcare, and we're seeing a lot of action there. I mean, medtech is a big area. I mean, despite years and years of work, India still imports about 70% of the medical products, right? And there is a lot of government impetus, but companies still have to come around to set up their own manufacturing, set up processes which are good enough, right? Because with imports, the doctors are now used to using products of a certain quality. So, firstly, the Indian companies need to set up plants of that quality, then get over the sort of the colonial overhang that doctors have, that products only from Germany or products only from US or Europe uh, are better, right? They need to start being open to be using indigenous products, which we're seeing a trend, but I think it's taking its time to change. To distribution, so there are lots of areas. Technology, I think healthcare is still one of those sectors where technology penetration has been relatively slow. If you see the EMR adoption, I mean, today also most doctor prescriptions are written by hand, right? Whereas in the US, 95% of doctor prescriptions are electronic, and maybe 5% are written by hand. So India has a long way to go on digitization of healthcare records, of digitization of the interactions of the hospital, etc. Insurance penetration is also very low. Government has done a lot of work on in Ayushman Bharat and other things, but there's still a long way to go. I mean, India, I mean, 50% of people still end up going into poverty because of a large medical bill, right, which is still not fully solved for. So there is a lot of there's a lot of gap in the financing in healthcare. So there are lots of pockets that we see is an opportunity. I think as a VC, we can have a wish list of opportunities that we want to fund something in, but it's also a function of the substrate, right? It's also a function of a company in that space where the founder is aligned, is growing, the economics are good. So there's a lot of things that need to come together to be able to make a investment decision.
Correct. Quite agree to that point. And I think you have an interesting. I was going through your book, comic side of investing, right? Startup investing, I guess, which you and Alka wrote together, and it's a fantastic comic book. And I didn't expected something, from someone who invests in startups, right? To be, to be taking a jab at the very ecosystem, to be even fanatical or critical about your own professions, right? And you have very openly discussed scenarios and sarcasms involved. And I really like that Bark Tank script where the judge starts pitching their own firm, and the Bark Tank script, the Bark Tank,
Huh.
the
Right, right,
Shark Tanks of what, yeah, you have name with a Bark Tank, right?
right.
And that itself is very funny, right? And that's what happens, right? That's they've quite commented on that, right? How do you see that? So any any of yours favorite, any script that you yourself like, oh, this was so funny, and sometimes you just sitting in your office discussing, and oh, we have written this in our book and scenario, right? So any of your favorites in your own book which you really like?
So I think there are lots of them. I mean, again, because we wrote it all, they're all our favorites because we've, when we say some truth, some hearsay, I would say all of it is truth. Nothing is hearsay. Every scenario that we've written may not have directly happened to us, but may have happened to someone else in the ecosystem because we also all talk to each other. It's a small ecosystem, right? Um, I have a few favorites. I think. One of my favorites is, in fact, it's probably the first cartoon, is that everyone thinks that VC, or at least the startup founders, have a notion that VCs are just sitting on top and they are the ones controlling everything. But if you see, startups are running after VCs and VCs are running after LPs, right? So there is a value chain, and there's always someone who's above you in the value chain that you're answerable to, and people don't realize that side. So that's one which is actually very true to our industry. Most people don't realize that. Second is, I think VCs also, and we've taken a lot of jibe on the VC, as you've seen. VCs also change the flavor of their own pitches to LPs based on whatever is the flavor of the season. So if today climate investing is the flavor of the season, whether someone understands climate or not, they're pitching climate investing, right? So we've talked about that in a very funny way because we've seen that, you heard of that happen a lot. Um, One of the other favorites I have is, I think, where the founder calls the VC and VC's like, oh, I'm busy in a board meeting, and there's a picture, he's actually on a safari, right? So I think everyone sort of faced those. Everyone's, played hooky at work and, not shown up or said that they're busier than they are, which is never the case. So I think I really like the visuals of that particular cartoon strip.
So to introduce characters in your book, I have made a very small Very simple game. It's known as one word answer. That's it.
Okay.
So it's gonna be about the characters in your book, which is of course stakeholders in Indian startup
Right.
business, and you just have to say one word, which is the prime quality of the character, right? So I'll start with that, and one by one I'll introduce the characters. So startup founder, one word for the startup founder.
Passionate.
Government bodies,
Slow.
corporates,
Slower.
incubators,
Necessary evil.
okay, VCs,
Useless.
LPs,
Hard to reach.
Alchemy Growth Capital.
The best.
Awesome. So that's it. Thank you so much for participating in this small activity. And I think a very good discussion as of now. And I've got a lot of insights right from your journey to the kind of culture that you have built at Alchemy. And again, while building this culture at Alchemy, you're also trying to bring people to discuss, in different niches in
Yeah.
healthcare, in consumer wellness, to come together and talk to each other, while you are also able to get insights and invest in better startups. So I think that's quite good, and I think healthcare has come into special focus because I have been also my job is also to talk to a lot of investors for
Right.
our portfolio companies. I've seen a great rise in VC funds with who are now focused on healthcare after COVID, right? So COVID has a large impact which exposed healthcare ecosystem in India, I guess. Healthcare and wellness both, I guess.
Yes.
A lot of companies who have now come on wellness, they are now making, you know,
Yes.
alternative food items which are healthier options for snacking, as you were mentioning, right? So, what have been your three learnings and unlearnings after COVID, right? So, would you like to reflect on that?
Right. So, COVID was obviously a big, I think it just sort of unveiled all the gaps that were there in healthcare, right? From distribution challenges to, the testing infrastructure, etc. I mean, the number of molecular testing labs that came up during COVID, we didn't even have that kind of labs earlier in India. Now there's like overcapacity. So, COVID certainly changed that. I think the biggest impact that COVID had was that for everyone, health is front and center. You talk to anyone, they are talking about health, they're talking about preventive health. They want to take much more control of their health in their hands. This was something that wasn't happening. If you see in the diagnostic space, there's so much preventive test that is happening, right? I mean, people just suddenly want to get their vitamin D tested. I mean, who was doing that before a doctor prescription? But now people are just doing these tests at home as if it's like taking a candy. So I think a lot has changed. I think a big learning is that and it sort of goes back to my earlier theme of consumerization in healthcare. People are taking control. People are looking at teleconsultation solutions, so convenience is becoming a big theme in healthcare, and I think it's moving in that direction. I think what we had to unlearn was that health is not just about clinical, and I think it goes back to the previous point also, that it's not just influenced by the doctor, because earlier the way we would look at healthcare was that it is influenced by the doctor, and doctor is actually at the center of the ecosystem and everything is around that, and that may be partially true. But I think what's changing is that doctor is not the center. It's doctor and the patient that have become the center, and everything, services, whether it's diagnostics, pharma, everything is around that. Everyone is trying to cater to the demands of the patient, including the doctor. So I think that has been a big shift, and that has been slightly harder to unlearn, that the doctor is not the center of the universe. And I think it's a harder thing for doctors to also accept and acknowledge.
Correct. I think totally right, and that's what we have also seen the kind of healthcare companies that where we have invested. is more customer centric approach is being there, where healthcare professionals now have to be available for their customers or clients, and have to see what their journey is like. Even we have seen apps like where you can upload your health history there, and then two three doctors can collaborate and work upon your case study. So very interesting on that part, and I think to end this conversation, I would like you, since I am at the privilege right now, so I would like you to give an maybe a quick elevator pitch for your book, right? So that would be my pleasure to hear you that thing. It's an interesting book, by the way, and there is, because you cannot pitch. It's very hard to pitch a comic book, even if I'm asking you to do that, because you see by there is a lot of graphics involved, a lot of picturization involved. You cannot contain that into words. But of course, I would love if you can, maybe give a two-liner or something, maybe.
So I think if anyone wants to learn about startup investing, this is the book that demystifies what startup investing is all about. So if you want to, if you're a founder, if you're a VC, if you're a LP, anyone in the ecosystem, this is the book to learn about the industry, and there is nothing else like that. So I would urge you to get your hands on it. We only have 1,000 copies printed, so I think the sooner you get it, the better it is before it runs out. That's a little bit of my elevator pitch. You have to create scarcity.
It's also it's also available on Kindle. I read it on Kindle, and it was fantastic reading it there. So thank you so much, Mansi, for joining on Tribex. We'll keep having this conversation in future as you write a newer book, or as you come up with, another maybe feather on your journey. Right? You're continuously, finding yourself out, building your
Thank
tribe.
you. Thank you,
So thank you
Utkarsh,
so
for this
much
very
for
engaging conversation. I think a lot of other conversations, you also run this podcast very differently. I think the pitches that you made me do is something I'm not used to doing. So I think I should just up my game on that. But thank you so much, Utkarsh, for putting this together. And I hope your listeners can enjoy this. And please buy our book, a shameless plug here. All right.
sure,
Okay.
sure.
Thank you so much. Thanks.